The shadows beneath the bridge. It had been months since Daniel last felt safe. Since he lost his job, his apartment, and everything familiar, the world seemed colder, quieter in the worst ways. The bustling streets were a constant reminder of what he had lost, and the nights were his worst enemy. But under the bridge, at least he had shelter. The old stone bridge, nestled near the outskirts of town, had become his new home. By day, cars roared overhead, and the constant gave him a strange comfort. But as the sun set and shadows crept over the landscape, a suffocating stillness would fill the air. He wasn't the only one who took refuge here. The bridge had a reputation among the homeless. But recently, Daniel had noticed fewer and fewer people sticking around. One night, Daniel sat by his small fire, trying to keep warm. The flames flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the cracked walls of the bridge. He heard footsteps nearby, but saw no one. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely breaking the silence. No answer. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the eerie feeling settling in his chest. The fire sputtered, its light dimming as a cold breeze swept through the area. Daniel pulled his thin blanket tighter around himself and closed his eyes. Sleep came in fits, broken by strange dreams. He dreamt of eyes, hundreds of them, watching him from the dark corners of the bridge. He woke up, heart racing, only to find himself staring into the same shadows. That's when he first saw it, something, or someone, crouched near the bridge's far end. At first, he thought it was another homeless person, maybe someone who needed help. But the figure didn't move like a person. It was hunched over, limbs too long, with hands that scraped the dirt as it crawled forward. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He blinked, and the figure disappeared, swallowed by the shadows. "Just my imagination," he whispered to himself. Though the unease lingered, the night dragged on, each passing minute feeling like an eternity. He kept telling himself that it was nothing, that the exhaustion was getting to him. But the next night, the figure came closer. This time, it wasn't just a glimpse. Daniel had been staring into the fire, trying to stay awake, when he heard the unmistakable sound of something scraping against the stone. His eyes darted to the edge of the bridge, and there it was again, closer, clearer. The thing had a face, but it was all wrong. Its eyes were wide and black, reflecting the dim light of the dying fire. Its mouth stretched afar across its face, grinning unnaturally, teeth jagged and yellow. It stared at him, unmoving. Daniel froze, unable to breathe, his mind racing for a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. It wasn't human. He wanted to run, to scream, but his body refused to move. The creature slowly tilted its head, as if studying him, before disappearing once again into the darkness. This time, it didn't crawl away. It simply faded, as if it had never been there. The next day, Daniel tried to warn the few others who still stayed near the bridge. Most didn't believe him, brushing off his story as the ramblings of a sleep-deprived man. But an older man named Jake nodded solemnly when Daniel described the creature. "I've seen it," Jake said quietly. "It only comes at night, gets closer every time. No one who sees it sticks around for long." That night, Daniel stayed awake, his nerves on edge. He knew it would come again, and he was right. As the hours passed, the air grew colder, and once more, the scraping sound began. This time, the figure emerged fully from the shadows, standing tall. It was no longer crawling. Daniel scrambled to his feet, heart racing. The creature's grin widened, and its long fingers twitched as it stepped toward him, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on invisible strings. "Stay back," Daniel shouted. But his voice sounded weak, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the night. The creature didn't listen. It was close now, close enough that Daniel could see the black veins pulsating beneath its pale, stretched skin. Its breath, cold and rancid, brushed against his face as it leaned in. Daniel stumbled backward, tripping over his few belongings, and fell to the ground. The creature loomed over him, its black eyes glinting with malicious intent. He knew there was no escaping it. He could feel its icy grip on his soul, pulling him into the same darkness that had swallowed the others. The last thing Daniel saw was its grin widening further to wide for any human face as everything went black. The next morning, the bridge was quiet. The fire pit where Daniel had sat was cold, his blanket abandoned. No one spoke of him, just another face lost to the night, another name forgotten beneath the bridge. But if you listen closely, after dark, you can still hear the scraping,